You're always busy with that little home business of yours and never pay attention to the housework. And with that, my mother-in-law's familiar snide remarks started up once again. I'm Jacqueline, a 32-year-old web designer. I live with my husband, Mike, and his mother in our family home, which used to be Mike's childhood home. I was employed at a company before I got married, but I decided to go independent and work from home as a web designer after tying the knot. Most of my work comes from referrals from the company I used to work for, from clients who liked my designs. They didn't want to lose a valuable resource like me, so they keep sending work my way. This setup is beneficial for both of us. I save on commuting time, and I had also wanted to properly manage my household duties after marriage. Both my former employer and I are satisfied with this arrangement. However, my live-in mother-in-law doesn't seem to find it amusing that I'm working. She's old-fashioned and often says, it's common sense for a wife to become a full-time housewife and support her husband once she's married. It's different from those old days. Most households have both partners working now. Mike tries to appease her, but she retorts, you're earning the money we're living on. She needs to handle the housework properly, seemingly unconvinced. Your wife's not earning much with that home business of hers, is she? My mother-in-law doesn't seem to understand my job and always refers to it as a home business. I feel like I'm managing the housework well in between my work, but she's discontented because my way of working is different from the full-time housewife she imagined. Maybe to her, who deeply cares for her only son, I'm the wicked woman who stole her precious child. She's been throwing sarcastic remarks at me since the beginning of our marriage. She seems to dislike everything I do. Mike told me that she's been relying more on him since his father passed away about 5 years ago. While he does seem annoyed, he also seems happy to be needed by his mother. Our home, situated in a residential area, was purchased by Mike's father about 30 years ago. The remaining mortgage was paid off with his life insurance, and the house is now in his mother's name. It's just the right size for the three of us, and it even has a room for me to work in, which is a big help. My mother-in-law has been living here for 30 years and seems to have many friends in the neighborhood who often come to visit. When her friends come over, I have to interrupt my work to serve them tea and snacks. When these women of her age gather, they often start talking about the issues they have with their daughters-in-law. My daughter-in-law always runs back to her parents' house at the slightest issue. She's here only about half the year. My daughter-in-law spends money like water. My son is having a hard time. We even had debt collectors coming. It was terrible. Listening to these conversations from my workspace, I can't help but feel frustrated. They're always trying to outdo each other on how bad their daughters-in-law are. They never have anything good to say about them. The daughter-in-law here is amazing, managing both her work and the housework. One of my mother-in-law's friends praised me. But my mother-in-law didn't seem pleased. She's not doing anything great with her work. It's just like a little home business. I wonder how much she's even earning, huh? She said it loudly, making sure I could hear. My daughter-in-law spends all the money she makes from her part-time job on herself, another friend chimed in. Then someone else added, the money my wife earns is hers, and the money her husband earns is for everyone. At that, the whole group burst into laughter. Things weren't like that in our day. My mother-in-law began, launching into one of her usual tales. I put on my headphones to drown her out. I've heard these stories countless times, and I'm tired of them. Even worse, they often disrespect modern wives, and I just can't bear to listen. Blocking out the noise, I focused on my work. One day, during dinner, Mike announced he wanted to buy a new car. I've been thinking about getting a new car. Is that okay? He asked casually. Why do you need your wife's permission to buy a car? My mother-in-law snapped. Mike hurriedly tried to explain. Well, it's a car for all of us. I can't just decide on my own, can I? Buying a car is a big decision, one that shouldn't be made alone. Still, my mother-in-law wasn't satisfied and continued arguing. You're the only one with a driver's license, so you should buy whatever car you want. My poor husband, who usually does whatever his mother tells him to, looked at me helplessly. You can decide, I said, throwing him a lifeline. Don't constantly ask your wife's opinion. Just decide for yourself. My mother-in-law scolded. Mike always checks with me or his mother about everything. It's good that he's not selfish, but his indecisiveness can be frustrating. His father, my late father-in-law, was the type of man who decided everything on his own, and my mother-in-law often complained about it. Growing up, Mike witnessed these dynamics and believes it's wrong to be too assertive. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who grew up with a domineering husband, thinks that's exactly how a husband should be. My mother-in-law's dissatisfaction with Mike's constant need for approval is always directed at me. Jacqueline is always nagging Mike. That's why he's become like this, she blames me. I was taken aback and didn't know what to say. Yeah, Jacqueline is always complaining. That's why I can't make decisions on my own. Mike joined in, pinning the blame on me. I defended myself, but it felt pointless. Mike never stands up for me. We've been married for about 2 years, and in all that time, he's never defended me in front of his mother. When she's not around, he apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry. You're really the most important person to me." But I can't trust him anymore. He initially seemed considerate, but I've realized he never truly stands by me. I'm starting to wonder if I need to reconsider our relationship. I'm starting to worry about whether I can keep living with Mike. There's a difference between kindness and indecisiveness, and I just wish he would stand up to his mother. About a month later, Jan's new car arrived. The smell of a new car is the best. "Let's all go for a drive on my next day off," he said gleefully. His excitement was contagious, and even my mother-in-law seemed happy. "That's a nice car. It must have been expensive, right? But it's okay since it's coming out of your salary, isn't it?" she asked. My husband didn't respond, too busy fiddling with the car's new features. I stood there, dumbfounded, looking at the expensive-looking vehicle. There's certainly a limit. Even though I had said he could get what he wanted. When he came inside, still in high spirits, I confronted him. "How much did that car cost?" $60,000, he answered nonchalantly. Seeing the shock on my face, he added, "But you said I could buy any car I wanted, didn't you?" My mother-in-law quickly took his side. "That's right. You left it up to Mike, so don't complain now." It was true. I had left it up to him, but I had expected him to consider our financial situation. "Where's that kind of money coming from?" I asked, ignoring her. "Well, I'm paying with a loan," he stammered. My mother-in-law shot back angrily. "Jacqueline, don't complain. You're not the one paying." I wasn't sure if she was angry because I had ignored her or because she didn't like my questioning, but she glared at me fiercely. "You're a disagreeable daughter-in-law, always complaining about something, even though you're living off Mike's salary." "I have a job too," I snapped. But she wasn't finished. "What are you talking about? You're not earning much with your part-time job. Mike makes $5,000 a month." She looked down on me, as if mocking me. I was about to correct her, tell her that I made that amount, but when I turned to my husband for support, he had disappeared into his room. I'd been patient until now, but this was the last straw. "I want a daughter-in-law like you to leave as soon as possible," my mother-in-law spat. I didn't feel like defending my salary anymore. It seemed pointless. My frustration with her comments was overshadowed by my disbelief at my husband's behavior. Wasn't it him who had caused this argument in the first place, with his indecisiveness? "Okay, I'll leave then," I said, my voice steady. I went to my home office, grabbed my laptop and a few other essentials, and walked out of the house. "I'll come back for the rest of my things later." I faced my mother-in-law, who was glaring at me with a terrifying expression, while my husband remained holed up in his room. "The next time you come here, make sure you've signed the divorce papers," my still furious mother-in-law yelled at me. "Did you hear me, you useless woman?" It was the first time I had ever heard her use such harsh language, and I was taken aback. Ignoring her, I stormed out of their house. Was she angry because I said I would leave as she had asked? Or was it because I confronted my husband about the money? Either way, I knew for sure that I wanted to leave that house as soon as possible. After storming out, I went straight to my parents' home. "What happened all of a sudden?" my mother asked, startled by my sudden appearance. "I don't know what's going on, but you can stay here as long as you need to," my dad said, reading the situation from the look on my face. I never heard from my husband after that. The man who used to treasure me before our marriage no longer existed, and I realized how foolish I had been not to see through a husband who only listens to his mother. Talking to my parents about what happened calmed me down. You don't have children, so it's better to divorce sooner rather than later, my mom advised, and I agreed. I had a job and wouldn't be inconvenienced by the separation. That weekend, my father helped me move my belongings out of my husband's house. My husband was nowhere to be seen, and my mother-in-law never left her room. Standing in front of my husband's door, I called out, "Thank you for everything. Could you sign the divorce papers?" I slid the papers under the door. A curt voice replied from behind it, "I've signed. Is this okay?" My heart sank at how cold and indifferent it all felt. Without saying anything more to my mother-in-law, I left the house. I had lived there for about 2 years, but I couldn't recall many good memories. I headed straight to City Hall and submitted the divorce papers. I wanted to settle it quickly. If a marriage could end with a piece of paper, then I wanted to be done with it. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house and continued working from there. I had thought about renting a place of my own, but my mother insisted, "Please stay here for a while. It's much safer than living alone." My father agreed, saying, "Mike and his mom are strange. They might come looking for you." I doubted they would, but staying with my parents gave me peace of mind. Luckily, I could work from anywhere, so I decided to stay with them for a while. About 2 months later, I had almost forgotten about my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law when I received a call from an unknown number. Who could that be? I thought. Assuming it was a wrong number, I ignored it, but the calls kept coming. Reluctantly, I answered, only to hear my ex-husband's voice. "Why didn't you answer the phone sooner?" He seemed quite flustered. "Well, it's an unknown number, and besides, we're not related anymore, so I'm going to hang up," I said, about to end the call. Wait, he quickly interjected. "I can't connect my smartphone." "Why is that?" His voice sounded desperate. "I wouldn't know. You should check with your phone company," I replied, and then something occurred to me. "Are you, by any chance, not depositing money into your bank account?" During our marriage, I had been depositing money from my salary into the account used for paying public utilities. His salary was also transferred there, but it was such a small amount that it wasn't enough. He was selling health food products, but his basic salary was low because it was based on commissions. People who got a lot of orders seemed to make good money, but he didn't do well. He was almost only receiving the basic salary, so just a few $100s were being transferred to the account each month. I had been covering the rest at the end of every month, but for the past 3 months, only his salary had gone in. Our argument about the car and me leaving the house had been in the middle of the month, so the payments for that new car might have already started. My ex-husband on the other end of the phone fell silent. "I've been managing all of this with my own salary. From now on, you'll have to figure it out on your own," I told him, resisting the urge to say, "Serves you right," and hung up. My ex-husband probably never told his mother how much he was actually earning. His mother didn't realize that ever since our marriage, we had mostly been living off my salary. Mike must have been too embarrassed to admit that he earned less than his wife. Utilities like electricity and water aren't easily shut off, but the first thing to get cut is usually the cell phone service. A few days later, on a quiet weekend morning, our doorbell rang loudly. When my dad answered, I could hear him arguing with someone at the front door. "We have nothing to do with you anymore, so leave," he said. Seeing my normally calm father so angry, I knew something was wrong. My mom and I headed toward the entrance. "I just want to see Jacqueline," a familiar voice demanded. Hearing my ex-mother-in-law's voice made my heart race. Just as my dad had predicted, she had come all the way to our home. When she saw me, she started yelling, her face contorted with anger. "Because you stopped depositing money into the account, the electricity and water got cut off," she screamed. My parents and I were taken aback. What did she mean the electricity and water had been cut off? Just then, my ex-husband arrived, desperately trying to calm her down.
"Mom, stop it."
"This has nothing to do with Jacqueline," he pleaded, but my ex-mother-in-law shook off his hand and continued her tirade. "Mike makes $5,000. Why would the electricity and water get cut off?" she shouted. "You're mistaken," I said, finally able to get a word in. "I'm the one who makes $5,000. Her eyes widened in surprise at my words. She turned to Mike, waiting for confirmation. "That's right. It wasn't my salary, it was all Jacqueline's." He admitted it, his shoulders slumping.
Huh?
How can you earn so much with a part-time job? My ex-mother-in-law looked at me as if I were a fox who had tricked her. I've told you before, it's not a part-time job, it's a real job, I replied. The color drained from my ex-mother-in-law's face. How much does Mike make? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. About $500 net, he answered, his voice almost disappearing. There was a moment of silence. Then my ex-mother-in-law said something unbelievable. Jacqueline, can't you come back? The whole leave us thing was a joke. She begged, adopting a low posture that reminded me of someone trying to butter me up. What are you talking about? I'm divorced. I have nothing to do with you two anymore. Even though I firmly declined, my ex-mother-in-law continued to plead in an overly familiar way. You can just remarry Mike. If we start the paperwork now, it'll be fine. My dad stepped in when I was too flabbergasted to respond. We're done with you. If you don't leave right now, we'll call the police. At the sound of my dad's intimidating voice, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law hurriedly left. If you show up again, I'm calling the cops right away, my father delivered as a final warning while the mother and son wobbled away. What a bunch of unpleasant people. My mother was astounded, but my father seemed even more furious. I'm glad you got out of that marriage, Jacqueline. A while after that incident, I got an update about the ex-family from one of Mike's friends. In the end, Mike had sold his family home and land, moving into an apartment with his mother. The new car he barely used had been sold too, and the proceeds from the land sale went to pay off the remaining loan. He had cleared his debts, but instead of settling down to work, Mike had blown all his money on gambling. After squandering the money from selling his family home, he disappeared without a trace. His mother, left behind, had developed dementia and had been placed in a care facility. I'm doing well in my job now and living alone. I've recently started dating a man I met through work. He's understanding about my divorce and is very dedicated to his job. He's definitely not the kind of guy who relies on his wife's money to make expensive purchases like Mike did. We're not engaged yet, but we both feel like we could marry each other.